This is the day we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Good morning and welcome to church. We are not in the sanctuary these days, but this is still church. For church is not the building, it is the people, and wherever we are gathered is sanctuary. Beth and I, like you, are connecting for these services from our homes with the help of Michael Feeney, providing technical support and guidance from his home. Today we're joined by Win Lawson, connecting from his home, to give us music on his trombone, as he's done for the past several Easters. I welcome those of you who would normally be in our pews, and those who are worshiping with us for the first time. If you'd like to know more about our congregation, send us a message through our Facebook page or our website, firstparishtsituate.org, and we'll add you to our email list. Over email this week, we'll share information on Monday night meditation, Wednesday night story time, Thursday afternoon tea, and Friday game night. I remind you also that I'm here if you'd like to talk, and we are here for one another. Usually, I would begin this celebration by wishing you all happy Passover and happy Easter. But with all that is going on in the world and in our lives right now, happy seems trite. Perhaps it always was for these holy days. And now one of the good things these hard times is revealing is the deeper truths at the heart of the stories we look to for meaning. For Passover isn't about great foods and bringing families together, and Easter isn't about rabbits, chocolate, or Easter egg hunts. All these are ways we highlight the importance of these days. And though they are different holidays, they share the common message of people beginning in darkness, released to new life together. Passover is not just the story of Moses, and Easter is not just the story of Jesus. Both are the stories of people who came through suffering to emerge into freedom, tied even tighter together. These stories offer us good news today, perhaps not happy news, but news of where we too might find meaning, and more important than happiness, joy. As we prepare to ponder these stories again, let us offer the light of our church chalice and all the lights we have at home. I invite you to light your candle along with me now. For holy days on which we recall the old stories, we light our flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and the strength of those marking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering today in sacred space, which connects all our spaces, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan for our future, to be alive in the present, we light our flame. Now, would you join me in saying the covenant of our church? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to cherish the living earth, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. Beth's now going to sing for us our opening hymn, Hymn of Promise, and it will be in the chat box on Facebook. It's also on our order of service on our webpage. I invite you to sing along.
Butterflies would soon be free in the cold and snow
So this is the time in the service where if we were together, I would invite the children and anybody else who wanted to share some conversation to come down front. So imagine yourself coming down front or lean in a little more. And if we were together, I would say to you, what do you notice in church that's different this morning? So take a minute and look around. And if you're on our Facebook watch party, maybe you want to type what you're seeing into the comments. So what do you see? Today we have lots of flowers here. We've got some eggs over here, and we've got Mrs. Shaw's butterfly painting, and I've got butterflies on my stole. And when you see Beth, see if you can spot her butterfly earrings. So I might ask you, why do we have these things here? And I know very quickly, because you are all so smart, that you would say they're symbols of new life. They're symbols of spring. They remind us that after winter, flowers bloom, that life comes from eggs, and that butterflies are a symbol of freedom in the way they fly so many miles, but also in the way they come into being. I bet in school, in science experiments, you've probably seen a cocoon, or maybe even watched the caterpillar get it spun around it, and then how it after a time of staying in its cocoon, it pushes through to break out of the cocoon. And that's some sort of a painful process to watch. And sometimes you might think, oh, I would like just to break that cocoon open and help the caterpillar or the new butterfly to come out. But when people do that, because some people do give in to the impulse and want to help, the butterfly doesn't survive. The butterfly needs the process of breaking out of the cocoon in order to be that beautiful, free butterfly that we love to see fluttering around our bushes. We can't help the butterfly by taking away its struggle. The only way we can help the butterfly is by keeping its cocoon safe while it's going through that struggle, and by creating a world that's safe for butterflies and caterpillars, getting rid of pesticides, planting butterfly bushes. Those are how we can help care for butterflies, but we can't take away its struggle. And you know, it's like that in life for us to do too. Today we're remembering Easter and Passover that were times of struggle for people a long time ago. And they had to go through that struggle. And we have to go through struggles in our own lives, like this one that we're all in together right now, but other times too. And we can't really take away these times of struggle for one another, even though sometimes that's all we would love to do. But we can make things easier for each other by being there, holding on a hand, even if we can't touch one another now, holding on a hand metaphorically, reminding people we are here, offering the support we can. And so when you guys go through hard times, as some days you will, I hope you'll remember that even though you have to go through those times, you're not alone. We're all here for you. And now, remembering hard times and the good things that come out of them, let's sing our song, Love Break Our Hearts.
Love once again break our hearts.
This is the time in the service where we share our joys and our sorrows with one another. I invite you to send me joys and sorrows during the week. I haven't received any this week, so at home, I invite you now to share your sorrows with one another. I place this stone for all our sorrows, and let's say our response, may love abound. And now I invite you to share your joys with one another. I place this stone for our joys. May love abound. And join me now in our unison prayer. We give thanks for being. We give thanks for being here. We give thanks for being here together. And now in prayer, let us open our hearts to mystery. O you who are the love which holds us all, we give thanks on this Easter morning for the triumph of love over death, for the love that supports us through all our times of fear, our times of suffering, bringing us out of our narrow spaces into the broadness of light and love. You do not guarantee us happy endings, but you do guarantee that we will know that we are never alone, that the love of others goes with us, whatever the paths we walk. We give thanks for the paths which have brought us here together this morning. And we remember all who are on difficult paths at this time, all who are living with the coronavirus, all who are living in fear of contracting it, all who are out there working to care for others and putting themselves at risk. We give thanks for all the love that is being shown in the world these days, for all the care which is offered to people. We remember those who are vulnerable in other ways too, who are dealing with poverty and the loss of jobs, without health care, the strains of being home together. And we pray that our love somehow may extend to them, and that our love may become actualized in forms which help one another. Opening our hearts now to the fullness of this love, let us take time in silence to offer our own prayers, our own meditation. Did any of you dye Easter eggs this year? I dyed some last night. That's the red ones that are on the table over there. Did you ever wonder why eggs are a symbol of Easter? And they're a symbol for Passover too. The egg on the table that isn't dyed is the one from our Seder plate. Eggs, of course, are a symbol of new life, and that's a part of why they appear on our Passover and our Easter tables. But there's more to their symbolism than that. There are other symbols of new life we could use if that were all that eggs represented. But eggs aren't just eggs, are they? We know that inside them are chicks waiting to be hatched, and the chick coming out of the egg is part of the power of their symbolism. But it's even more than that, as I realized when I watched a chick come out of its shell this summer. You probably know this, but it hadn't struck me before. The chick doesn't just break open its shell and hop out. First, after the chicken lays the egg, it sits there incubating for about 21 days. At the end of that time, the egg begins to rock. Then you see something pushing against the shell. Then a crack appears, more cracks, a little piece of the shell comes off, then more pieces, until finally the shell separates into fragments. This whole process can take up to 18 hours. But even then, the chick doesn't hop out all fluffy and yellow. It's gray and damp and exhausted. It flops down and lies still as its energy returns. And that might take another 24 hours. Only after that time will we see the chick who in cartoons hops out of the shell. A real egg reminds us that emerging into new freedom, new life is a process, not a single swift action. And that reminder is crucial to the holy seasons of Passover and Easter. Both show us people breaking out, like the chick, from tight places into larger life. The Passover ritual speaks of the people coming out of Mitzrayim. In Hebrew, that word actually refers both to the land of Egypt and to a tight place. As Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt wrote last week in her Velveteen Rabbi blog, the story of the Exodus, the story we retell each year during the Seder, is the story of how our spiritual ancestors left Mitzrayim, the narrow place. The Pesach story begins in tight constriction. It begins in dire straits. It begins in a time and place of profound inequality, when there was an unthinkable gap between rich, Pharaoh, and poor, the ancient Israelite slaves. It begins with plagues, darkness, sickness, death, and leaving behind everything that was familiar. Sounds kind of like our tight place, doesn't it? And Easter also begins with people in a tight place. And I'm not thinking of Jesus here. Though Jesus' body was entombed in a cave after his death, his followers entombed themselves as well. After Jesus died and was buried, his followers went into hiding. They were afraid that they would be sent to be arrested, tried, and executed as he had been. So they shut themselves up together, venturing out alone or in pairs to secure food and listen furtively to the news. On the third day after Jesus' death, some of the women disciples went out to the tomb to prepare his body for a proper burial. They had been braver all along than the men, standing at the cross with Jesus throughout his dying, offering the comfort of their presence. When they got to the tomb, they found the stone which had sealed it rolled away, and the cave was empty. Startled, they looked around. A being dressed in radiant white told them not to look for Jesus among the dead, but to look for him among the living, and to bring that message back to the other disciples. They ran back and told the others what they had seen, but it took a while for the others to believe and then to trust this good news. They spent 50 days still pretty much in hiding, still held captive by their fears. It took 50 days for the strength of new life and freedom to root and grow in them, so that at Pentecost, we read the story of their brave preaching to crowds gathered in Jerusalem for the next big festival, the Feast of Weeks, preaching to them the news of justice for the poor, for which their rabbi had died. The basis for their fear didn't go away. In the following years, many of them were arrested, imprisoned, and executed for sharing Jesus' teachings that we should care for all with equity and justice. On this day of resurrection, we celebrate the largeness of spirit that broke out of their fear. Yes, the story tells us that it was Jesus who rose from the dead. But I think the part of the story that speaks to us, the part of the story which offers us hope, is the disciples' resurrection from fear to action, from their narrow place to wider life and freedom. Usually, when we hear these stories each year, we hear them believing at least that we are hearing them from the wideness of freedom and life. We hear them as if we had been freed from Egypt, freed from fear. But this year we connect differently to the stories. We hear them from the perspective of the Israelites held captive in Egypt. We hear them from the perspective of the disciples, afraid and uncertain in their dark room. For we hear them this morning literally and metaphorically from the narrowness of our houses, some more narrow than others, but all confined nevertheless, and all in the tight place of fear. But there couldn't be a better place to hear these stories. For whatever freedom we thought we had in past years was in some ways an illusion. We weren't free. The Passover ritual says that every year we must take in the story as if we were still held captive in Egypt. And so we are, held captive by structures which promote inequality, structures which keep us comfortable enough that we do not do all we could to break them open, to carry all people into freedom. We are held captive by words we are afraid to say, dreams we are afraid to pursue, days which do not feel as meaningful as we had hoped. But most years, distracted by Easter baskets and family seders, by the daily busyness which fills our days and our lives, we can ignore our captivity. We can see our freedom of movement as full freedom. But this year, there is nothing to distract us. And so we feel fully and uncomfortably the reality of all that hems us in. We cannot hide our eyes to the injustice of the systems which allow some of us to remain in the safety of our homes while others must be out and about caring for us, putting themselves at risk. We can't ignore the stories of the disparity between the death rates of African Americans and their place in the population. We can't ignore that those who live in polluted areas are more likely to die from the virus. We can't forget those who have lost their jobs and may lose their homes as well. We see the extra burden on those without health care. And above all, we are awakened to the shortness of our days. So this is the most powerful time to celebrate the stories of Passover and Easter. For these stories tell us that we do have the power to free ourselves, not from the ultimate end of death, but from the structures of fear which narrow the days we have been given. We are freed to rejoice this day, whatever it holds, and to act and to live to help others find reason and means to rejoice. During the Seder, when the story is told of how Yahweh parted the Red Sea so the Israelites could walk dry-footed between walls of water, some add the midrash that at first, when Moses asked for help, nothing happened. The people stood on the banks with Pharaoh's army gaining on them, feeling trapped and helpless. Finally, a young man named Nahshon, in faith, stepped into the sea, and only then did the waters part. I don't mean that we should step outside at this time and flout social distancing, but we can step outside the narrow spaces, the narrow spiritual spaces, wherever we physically are. We can help bring life and freedom to ourselves and to others by participating in UU Mass Action's Advocacy Day on Tuesday. This year, you don't even have to travel into Boston for it. Here in Scituate, we can work in town with Stride on issues of diversity. We can volunteer with the food pantry, which is helping more and more families each week, and with SANS to care for people in need. If you're worshiping with us from another community, I hope you'll look into local groups you can partner with. We can all support the work of the UU Service Committee and other groups working around the world, recognizing that until all of us are free, none of us is free. And we can continue or take on practices of meditation and spiritual deepening to calm the fears which more than anything else keep us confined. Easter and Passover do not promise us happy endings. They do promise us amazing journeys if we will only find the courage to step out of our fears, out of our prisons, out of our eggshells and cocoons into the fullness of life. This is the good news these stories offer us every year, but this year with even greater power. We will pass over. We will Easter. We will emerge together into the greater life we desire. Beth's now going to lead us in singing our closing hymn, O Day of Light and Gladness. And now in your goings out and in your comings home, in your times of narrow places and in your times of freedom, may you know yourself held in great love, which will never let you go. And may you offer the presence, the power, and the touch of that love to one another and to the world. Go in peace and in joy.